I sat in the front pew of the church, hands folded neatly in my lap, staring at the polished mahogany coffin resting at the altar. My mother was inside. The woman I had spent my entire life trying to impress. The woman who, in the end, had made it painfully clear that no matter how hard I tried, I would never be enough. Tears pricked at the edges of my vision, but they weren't for grief. They were for closure. The kind I knew I'd never truly get. Beside me, my sister, Samantha, sniffled softly, dabbing at her eyes with a lace-trimmed handkerchief. Dramatic as always. Even now, at a funeral, she found a way to make the moment about her. She leaned into her husband, Tyler, who wrapped a protective arm around her. The perfect grieving daughter, the golden child. The one who had always been cherished. Samantha looked flawless. Even in mourning. Her black designer dress hugged her figure just right, her blonde curls cascading in elegant waves, subtle, effortless, as if she had orchestrated the entire event to be just another stage where she could shine. I swallowed the lump in my throat and cast a glance toward the second row. My aunt and uncle sat stiffly, avoiding my gaze. So did the rest of the family. They knew. They all knew. I had braced myself for what was coming, told myself I wouldn't care, that it wouldn't hurt. But when the lawyer spoke after the service, nothing could have prepared me for the words that followed. "I'm sorry, Brooke, Mr. Hendricks said, adjusting his glasses as he flipped through the pages of my mother's will. Your parents left everything to Samantha. A slow, cold numbness spread through me. Everything. I asked, my voice steady. Too steady. Yes. He hesitated before adding, your parents believed you were independent enough and didn't need financial support. Samantha, being a stay-at-home mother, required the assistance more. I felt my nails dig into the fabric of my dress. Independent enough. Samantha had 3 properties. A husband with a 6-figure salary. Luxury cars parked in the driveway of a home she never had to work for. And me? I had worked my way through college, juggled 2 jobs, and never, not once, had I asked my parents for a dime. But apparently that made me less deserving. That's ridiculous, Aunt Teresa muttered, finally breaking the tense silence. But Samantha? She didn't look surprised. She let out a delicate sigh, placing a hand over mine in what could have passed as sympathy, if I didn't know better. I mean, it does make sense, she murmured. You've always been so independent, Brooke. Mom and Dad just wanted to help me, that's all. That's all. I pulled my hand away. You knew, didn't you? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Samantha bit her lip. They may have mentioned something before. And there it was. The truth. I wanted to scream. To rage. To demand how, even in death, my parents had still managed to remind me that I was an afterthought. But I didn't. Because years of being the overlooked daughter had taught me one thing. Anger wouldn't change a damn thing. So instead I smiled. Because if they thought I was independent before, they had no idea what I was capable of now. I turned to the lawyer. Thank you for your time, I said smoothly, standing and gathering my purse. But I won't be contesting the will. Samantha blinked, her brow furrowing. Wait, you're not mad? I looked at her. Really looked at her. Then I tilted my head and stepped closer. Lowering my voice, my head held high. She had no idea. What Samantha didn't know, what nobody knew, was that I had already prepared my own final gift for our dear parents. And it would be unforgettable. I wasn't always invisible to my parents. At least I don't think I was. There must have been a time, maybe when I was a toddler, clutching at my mother's skirt, babbling nonsense to my father when they saw me. When they really saw me. I try to believe that there was a moment, however fleeting, when I wasn't just the other daughter. When I was enough. But if such a moment ever existed, it was long gone. Replaced by years of being second best. By years of watching Samantha get the praise, the love, the attention. By years of me earning everything on my own, while she was handed the world on a silver platter. And now? Now they had sealed their legacy. Even from the grave, my mother had made her final declaration. Samantha mattered. And I did not. But what my mother had failed to realize, what my father had never understood, was that I had stopped seeking their approval long ago. And now? Now I was done playing their game. Because if they thought they could write me out of their story, they were about to learn that I had been writing my own all along. But as I grew older, the difference between me and Samantha became impossible to ignore. She was the golden child. The one who could do no wrong. The daughter my parents doted on, praised endlessly, and lifted onto a pedestal so high that she never had to work for anything. And me? I was the afterthought. It started small. When Samantha won her first dance recital at 6, my parents threw her a lavish party, complete with a cake shaped like ballet slippers. There were balloons, decorations, applause. She beamed under the attention, soaking in their admiration. That same year I placed first in a spelling bee. My mother patted my head absent-mindedly and told me to keep up the good work before moving on to talk about Samantha's next performance. When Samantha turned 16, she got a brand new car, wrapped in a massive red bow, waiting in the driveway like something out of a movie. When I turned 16, I got a used bike. "You don't really go out much anyway, Brooke," my mother had said dismissively. I told myself it didn't matter, that I didn't need the approval, the admiration, the love, but deep down, stung. Still, I worked hard. While Samantha breezed through life on charm and favoritism, I built something for myself. I worked my way through college with 2 part-time jobs. I landed a stable career in finance. I saved every penny, invested wisely. I never relied on anyone. And yet, in the end, none of it mattered. That night, I sat in my tiny apartment, staring at the ceiling, replaying the lawyer's words over and over in my head. "Your parents left everything to Samantha." Of course they did. Why would I expect anything different? My phone buzzed, breaking the heavy silence. A message from Aunt Teresa. "Brooke, I just want you to know I think what your parents did was disgusting. You deserve better." A second later, another message followed. "You should fight this. Contest the will. It's not fair." Fair. The word made me laugh. A bitter, humorless sound in the quiet of my apartment. Nothing about my relationship with my parents had ever been fair. I had accepted that a long time ago. But what I couldn't accept, Samantha sitting there, pretending this was just another unfortunate inconvenience. Pretending she hadn't known all along. I didn't want their money, but that didn't mean I wouldn't leave my own mark on their legacy. I pulled open my laptop and logged into my email. There was someone I needed to reach out to, a certain lawyer. A week later, I stood in front of my parents' house. No, Samantha's house now. It looked the same. The neatly trimmed hedges, the grand front door, the windows gleaming in the afternoon sun. It even smelled the same, freshly cut grass, the lingering scent of my mother's lavender perfume still woven into the walls. But it wasn't home anymore. Hadn't been for a long time. The door swung open and there she was. Samantha. Her face lit up with feigned surprise. "Brooke, I wasn't expecting you." "No, of course she wasn't. I need to pick up some things," I said simply. "Mom had some personal letters and keepsakes I'd like to have." She hesitated, just for a second, but then she stepped aside, waving me in. "Of course. Take whatever you need." I walked through the house slowly, letting the memories press against me with every step. The living room where I had watched my parents shower Samantha with endless praise. The dining table where I had sat in silence while they gushed over her latest accomplishments. The staircase I used to climb quietly, unnoticed, while Samantha basked in the glow of their attention. I headed toward my father's old study. This was why I had come. I pulled open the heavy desk drawer, my fingers grazing over old documents, notebooks, letters. And then there it was. The original copy of my parents' will. I had already seen the version the lawyer read aloud. But this was different. My breath caught as my eyes scanned the page. Because there, in black and white, was a clause that hadn't been in the final document. A clause stating that my parents' estate was supposed to be split evenly between Samantha and me. I exhaled slowly, my fingers tightening around the paper. So Samantha had done more than just accept their favoritism. She had changed the will. I turned. She was standing in the doorway, arms crossed. She didn't look surprised. "You weren't supposed to see that," she said, her voice calm. Almost bored. I waited for an explanation. Confession. Anything. Instead, she just shrugged. "Mom and Dad always intended for me to have everything, Brooke," she said smoothly. "I just made sure their wishes were properly carried out." I had never hated her more. I could have screamed. Could have fought. Could have marched straight to a lawyer and exposed her for what she'd done. But I didn't. Instead, I smiled. A slow knowing smile. Thank you for your honesty, I said, my voice steady. That was all I needed to know. And with that I walked out of the house, already planning my next move. Because Samantha had just made one very big mistake. She thought I would let this go. She thought I was the same girl who had always been overlooked. But she was about to find out just how wrong she was. The truth had been sitting there all along, buried in my father's desk, waiting for me to find it. My parents had intended to split their estate between both of us. And now, I was going to make sure that Samantha paid for every lie, every betrayal, and every stolen piece of my legacy. She wanted everything. She was about to lose it all. But Samantha had made sure that never happened. She hadn't just accepted her role as the golden child. She had secured it, stamped it in ink, ensured that when our parents were gone, she would stand on top while I was left with nothing. She thought I'd do what I had always done. Accept it, swallow it, move on. She had no idea who she was dealing with. For the next week I planned. I could have gone straight to a lawyer, dragged her through court, exposed her fraud for what it was. But legal battles were slow, and Samantha? She was careful. By now, I had no doubt she had covered her tracks, tying up every loose end before I ever stepped foot in that house. No, this required something different. Something that would hit her where it really hurt. I just needed the right person to help me. I found him in a dimly lit bar downtown. The kind with cracked leather booths and the scent of aged whiskey soaked into the wooden walls. Hello, Tyler, I said, sliding into the seat across from Samantha's husband. Tyler looked up, startled. He wasn't expecting me. Brooke. He frowned, setting down his drink. What are you doing here? I folded my hands on the table. I know about the will. His entire body went still. What? I leaned in, my voice low and deliberate. I know Samantha changed it. I found the original version in Dad's study. My parents wanted me to have half of everything. But Samantha made sure that didn't happen. Tyler let out a slow breath, rubbing a hand over his face. He didn't look surprised. You knew, I said. It wasn't a question. He sighed, his shoulders slumping. I had my suspicions. He paused, staring at his glass. But Samantha? She controls everything. The finances, the house, the accounts. I don't ask questions anymore. Of course he didn't. Samantha had always been the dominant one in their marriage. Tyler was just another carefully placed piece on her chessboard, too worn down to fight back. But I wasn't here to judge him. I was here to use him. Listen, I said, my voice softening. I don't care about the money. I never have. Tyler let out a bitter chuckle. Samantha thinks you do. Samantha thinks a lot of things, I said simply. But she's wrong. I leaned forward, locking eyes with him. I don't want her money. I just want her to pay for what she did. Tyler studied me for a long moment. Then to my surprise he laughed. God, I'd love to see that, he muttered, shaking his head. But Samantha? She always wins, Brooke. She's untouchable. I smiled. Not this time. Because I knew something Samantha didn't. And I was about to use it. For the next week I dug deep. Not into her finances. Not into the properties she hoarded like trophies. I wanted something personal. And it didn't take long to find it. Late one night, scrolling through years of carefully curated social media posts, I found it. A photo from 3 years ago. A vacation in Italy, Samantha posing in front of the Colosseum with a group of friends. The problem? Tyler had never been on that trip. I clicked on the tag names, scanning the list. And then one stood out. Jason Miller. A man who wasn't just a friend. I clicked his profile, scrolling through old comments, interactions, searching for anything. And there it was. Flirtatious remarks. Inside jokes. Late-night messages spanning years. Samantha had been cheating on Tyler. And she had been sloppy about it. I sat back, my heart pounding. This was it. My first move. The beauty of revenge wasn't always in grand gestures. Sometimes it was in the slow unraveling. The quiet undoing of a person who thought they were invincible. I drafted a message. No words. No explanation. Just screenshots. The reply came almost instantly. Where did you get these? Does it matter? I typed back. You deserve to know the truth. A long pause. Then, meet me tomorrow. We need to talk. I smiled. Checkmate, Samantha. The next evening, I met Tyler at a quiet cafe on the edge of town. He was already there when I arrived, hunched over a cup of coffee, staring blankly at the table. The moment he looked up and saw me, I knew. He had seen everything. I slid into the chair across from him. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The air between us was thick with something fragile. Anger. Disbelief. Maybe even relief. How long? He finally asked, his voice hoarse. I exhaled. From what I found, at least 4 years. Tyler let out a bitter laugh, shaking his head. Of course, he muttered. Of course she would. His fingers tightened around his coffee cup, his knuckles white. I knew something was off, he admitted. The late-night work events, the business trips that didn't add up. But every time I asked, she made me feel like I was crazy, like I was being insecure. I stayed silent, letting him process. Then he looked at me, something new in his expression. Determination. What do you want from me, Brooke? I leaned back in my chair, crossing my legs. Nothing, I said. But I think you know what you need to do. His jaw clenched. He stared at the table for a long moment before nodding. Yeah, he murmured. Ido. I stood up, tossing a few bills onto the table. Then let's get started. As I walked away, I could already see the cracks forming in Samantha's perfect world. This was only the beginning. She thought she had one. She had no idea she was about to lose everything. Of course. Tyler picked up his coffee, but his hands were shaking too much to take a sip. I'm sorry you had to find out this way, I said. And for once I actually meant it. He let out a bitter laugh, his eyes locking onto mine. No, you're not. You wanted me to know. You wanted this to happen. I didn't deny it. Yes, I admitted. But only because Samantha deserved to be exposed. She's been playing everyone, Tyler. You, me, even my parents, right up until the day they died. He exhaled sharply, dragging a hand through his hair. And now what? What do you want from me, Brooke? I leaned in, my voice even. I don't want your money. I don't want your sympathy. I just want to watch her world fall apart. Tyler studied me for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then slowly the corners of his mouth lifted into something dark, something dangerous. You're not the only one. We sat there for nearly an hour dissecting every lie, every manipulation, every calculated move Samantha had made. Tyler wasn't just angry, he was cold. The kind of anger that doesn't explode. It simmers. It waits. And when it strikes, it destroys. I want a divorce, he said finally, his voice steady. And I want full custody of the kids. It was a bold move, a calculated strike. Samantha had spent years crafting her image as the perfect wife, the devoted mother. She needed that image. And Tyler? He was about to rip it away from her. The next morning, I watched from a distance as a courier approached Samantha's front door. She answered in a silk robe, her hair effortlessly styled, a steaming cup of coffee in hand. But the moment she saw the envelope, her divorce papers, her entire body stiffened. I wished I could hear her reaction. The sharp intake of breath, the frantic heartbeat, the sheer panic as she realized what was happening. But instead, I just watched as her fingers tightened around the papers, her knuckles turning white. And then just for a moment she glanced around, not at Tyler, not at her children, but at the neighbors. She cared more about what they thought than the fact that her marriage was crumbling right in front of her. Classic Samantha. I could have walked away then. Let Tyler handle the rest. But I wasn't finished. Samantha still believed she could control the narrative, manipulate her way out of this like she always had. She was wrong. That evening, with just a few clicks, I shattered the illusion she had spent her life protecting. Screenshots. Messages. Pictures. Years of deceit. But I didn't send them to Tyler. I sent them to everyone. Her mommy group chats. The charity board members. The homeowners association. Every woman who had ever looked up to her. By morning, Samantha's phone was on fire. She tried to deny it at first, spinning desperate explanations, but there was too much evidence. By noon, the whispers had turned into condemnation. By evening, she was a pariah. The friend she had spent years carefully cultivating? Gone. The reputation she had built? Destroyed. And for the first time in her life, Samantha was alone. The thing about people like Samantha is they never believe consequences apply to them. They lie, manipulate, twist reality into whatever suits them. They believe they are untouchable, that no matter what they do, things will always work out in their favor. But not this time. I made sure of that. A week after I sent out the truth, Samantha was spiraling. The school moms whispered behind her back at drop-offs. The charity board, where she once reigned supreme, had asked her to step down. And the worst part? Tyler had moved out, taking the kids with him. She had lost everything. But Samantha wasn't the kind of woman to go down quietly. No, she still had one last card to play. I was at work when the call came in, her name flashing on my screen. I debated ignoring it, letting her stew in the mess she created. But something inside me to hear what she had to say. I answered on the third ring. You ruined my life. Her voice was raw, almost unrecognizable. I leaned back in my chair, letting the silence stretch. No, Samantha, I said calmly. You did that all on your own. A sharp, bitter laugh. You think you're so clever, don't you? You think you've won. I don't need to win, I replied. I just needed the truth to come out. Silence. And then her voice dropped low and cold. You don't understand, Brooke. You think you've taken everything from me? Fine. But you better watch your back. Because I have nothing left to lose. And with that she hung up. A normal person might have felt a flicker of fear. But me? I knew Samantha. She wasn't a fighter. She was a pretender. And now, with nothing left to cling to, she was just a woman drowning in her own destruction. I smiled, setting my phone down. For the first time in years I felt free. She was all talk. Still, I wasn't about to let my guard down. Not yet. Because Samantha might have lost her reputation, her marriage, and her perfect image. But there was still one thing left. The house. I didn't need the money. But I needed to finish what I started. So I called Tyler. Do you still have the original will? There was a pause before he answered. Yeah. Why? I smiled, though he couldn't see it. Because it's time to fix what Samantha broke. It took a few more weeks, but eventually my lawyer filed the case. Samantha had fraudulently altered legal documents. That wasn't just deception, it was a crime. The evidence was airtight. And with Tyler's statement, she didn't stand a chance. The court ruled in my favor. My parents' original wishes were reinstated. Half of everything, including the house, was legally mine. I'll never forget the look on Samantha's face when the sheriff showed up with the eviction notice. You can't do this, she shrieked, her voice raw with rage. This is my house. I stood in the doorway, calm, composed, victorious. Not anymore. Her hands shook, curling into fists at her sides. She had nothing left. Where am I supposed to go? She whispered, her voice laced with something I had never heard before. Desperation. I tilted my head, pretending to consider it. I guess you'll have to be independent now. And with the sweetest smile I could muster, I handed her one last gift. An old used bicycle. The same kind my parents gave me for my 16th birthday, while Samantha was getting keys to her brand new car. The poetic justice of it nearly made me laugh. I walked back inside my house and shut the door, leaving her standing there, alone. For the first time in her life, Samantha had no one to fall back on. And for the first time in mine, I was finally free. The house was quiet. For years, I had tiptoed through its halls, feeling like an outsider in my own family. No more judgmental stares. No more whispered conversations about how different I was from Samantha. But as I stood in the opulent living room, surrounded by expensive furniture and carefully curated decor, I felt nothing. This was never my home. It was a battleground, a shrine to Samantha's privilege, a reminder of everything I had been denied. I knew what I had to do. The very next day, I put the house on the market. Not for profit, not for revenge, but because I wanted a clean slate. This place had been Samantha's kingdom, my parents' monument to it. There was no safety net. No doting parents to bail her out. No adoring social circle to validate her existence. She was finally living the kind of life she had always looked down on. And the funny thing, I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel guilty either. I just felt done. The money I received from my parents' estate? I donated most of it. Not out of spite, but because I had built my life without their help. I didn't need their wealth to define me. I kept enough to start over somewhere new. A different city. A different life. One where I wasn't Brooke, the forgotten daughter. Just Brooke. A week before I left town, Aunt Teresa invited me over for dinner. She had been the only relative who had stood by me through everything. As we sat at the table, she reached for my hand. "You know," she said softly, smiling in a way that held years of unspoken truths. "Your parents were wrong about you." I raised an eyebrow. "Oh, they always thought you were the one who didn't need them. That you were too strong, too independent." I frowned. "And," she sighed, "they built their world around Samantha because she needed to be propped up. She needed their validation, their money, their constant approval. She squeezed my hand. But you? You thrived despite them. And that scared them." The words settled deep inside me. Maybe she was right. Maybe my parents hadn't ignored me because I wasn't good enough. Maybe they ignored me because they knew I didn't need them the way Samantha did. And for the first time, that thought didn't hurt. That night, as I packed the last of my things, I took one final look around my old room. The girl who once lived here, the one who spent years trying to prove she was worthy, was gone. In her place stood a woman who had nothing left to prove. I picked up my bags, walked out the door, and never looked back. Because my past didn't define me. My future did.